right, is Matt Mosley, our new obstructed view. I think John will like that name, obstructed view podcast through Rogue Media Network. And John, one of your guys, one of your buddies, King McClure, has a podcast on this network now.
Nice.
And and he had Scott on. And as in typical Mosley form the other day, I came off the beach and I'm like, oh my gosh, the initial guest, Jakus, would be the perfect guest. And of course, I gave you like 10 minutes notice. So for once in your life, you had boundaries with me. You said, hey, we can't do this in 10 minutes. And so we actually waited a couple of days, and here you are. And we've had a soft opening, but this is really the true opening. So welcome to the new Mosley podcast. These are my very scholarly glasses that I have. But I'm excited for you, all the things going on at FAU. I'm not excited that as a boyhood, just like your Cubs hat on, I was in the junior Mavs club. I was a Rangers fan, of course, a Cowboys fan, and I got to grow up and cover all these teams. And the Celtics ended things with the Mavericks last night as we record this. And John, I thought it was fascinating that you have it, and we'll get into that. You have a connection, a really good connection to the Celtics coach. But hey, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you being with me today.
Thanks for having me. I like your new digs. I talked to King McClure last week on the phone, so I know he's doing well. And so you're in good company. And yeah, I don't
Yeah.
say no to you often, but with 10-minute notice, I had to. So I appreciate the 2-day notice this time, and I'm glad it worked out. And look forward to hanging out
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah. I don't want you to get too good at saying no. I think you're already getting a little better at it, but I think you probably thought, hey, the Waco media, I love those guys, but I'll be able to kind of move on and get to know this new media. And this very morning, and by the way, your SID for Basketball Genesis is very, very good.
She
But
is.
it has to be kind of comical for her to just constantly, because while setting this up, I was like, y'all made the official announcement that Aditya Mohatra is going to be an assistant coach for you, and he's a great friend of ours. And so I'm setting up his interview for my radio show, and she's been so gracious. But there has to be a part of her like, why am I dealing so much with this guy that's
You know,
not in this market? But
she's
that
unbelievable.
oh
And
man,
she's actually tougher than she's letting on to you because she's got
oh
the ability to say no. But I told her she can't say no to Mosley. Just a matter of when we fit it in. But she's a sweetheart and
yeah,
unbelievable. You know, when you move to a new job, you don't necessarily know who's going to be waiting for you, but she's been a
yeah.
home run. So I'm thankful for her.
That's very that's very good. And man, and what about, since I brought it up? This is the most recent news at FAU. Y'all have already been doing some. Oh, you got your guys in. You're getting to know them. You're conditioning. I don't know how many days. How many hours you get to practice with them. But to bring AD, as we call him, Coach Mohatra, was a big part of y'all's national title staff, and went off to the Phoenix Suns to do some. Well, he did a lot of things for them, kind of
Mhm.
coaching, some scouting. He was really involved a lot at different levels of the Phoenix Suns organization. But you are now bringing him to paradise, as you guys call it. That's a pretty neat hire. And again, this Baylor flavor, Obim, obviously Isaiah. So that's a really cool thing to bring some people that you're very familiar with. But AD, what kind of made him an attractive candidate, other than just the group text we're on together?
Yeah, I know that you think you're the center of that hire, but we're going to say you're one of the factors and how we get to the center of the deal. But
Mm-hmm.
he's been a friend of mine for a long time. We were GAs at Baylor together. We coached the Athletes in Action Tour overseas together, where he was my assistant coach. He's a great high school coach in the state of Texas. And then Driscoll and Tang got him to be a GA at Baylor. And our friendship started there. And we obviously won a championship together at Baylor when I came back from Gonzaga. And our families are friends, our wives are friends. You know, when I took the job, my daughter cried. She's 11. She didn't want to move. I
Mm.
told her I'd take her to Disney. I told her I'd take her to a Taylor Swift concert. None of it worked. She just kept crying. And I told her that AD's daughter, Milo, who's a year younger, is coming. And immediately she was fine. So the family side, he's also a home run. But his time at the Suns, he did front office work, he did draft work, he scouted the league. He worked with the offensive and defense coordinator and kind of oversaw the staff for the front office this year. So coaching roles, every single kind of role. He's clearly one of the smartest guys I've ever met, and could probably make more money outside of basketball than in it, but just loves the game. And I think he missed the college relationships, so we got lucky. We were able to steal him back from the NBA. So even though that was a lifelong dream of his to spend time in the NBA, we were able to trick him coming back into college sports, and we're lucky to have him. And between Baylor and the NBA, I think he's got plenty of experience. But even apart from that, he's a better man, and I think the way he takes care of the players is pretty special. So one of the smartest guys I've ever known. You always hire people that are smarter than you if you're doing your job as a boss, and I feel like I got to do that with AD.
So does this completes the staff? This was
Yeah.
the sort of well, it wasn't a well kept secret because Jerome Tang, when he came on with me like 2 months ago, just goes, "Yeah, he said AD's
Yeah.
headed over to FAU." So
You
we
know,
sort of,
Tang can sell ice to an Eskimo, and there's no keeping secrets with him. So, you journalists know where to get your sources
mm-hmm.
from, the ones that will leak them, and Tang's probably in that group. But in part because you guys are such great friends. But yeah, clearly you snuck it out of him a little while ago. Probably wasn't a great
Yeah.
secret. We had to let him finish his time with the Suns. So that's done now, and now we've got him full time.
All right, and his draft work, he would have been helping Phoenix get ready to look at several players. And I find it interesting that some guys you coached in Jacoby Walter and Eve Misi are
Mhm.
likely to go first round. And John, as great a program as y'all have had for a lot of years, that's pretty neat. This would be, as far as you correct me if I'm wrong, this could be the first time Baylor's had two first round picks and could with Bridges in this, and possibly he's being slated right now as a second round, could have three Bears go in the draft. I would think for you and AD and everybody that's been associated with the Baylor program, there's a lot of pride involved with that. But that's a neat. Y'all clicked off a lot of these. Okay, need to beat this team. Okay, we won our national title. That was the biggest. But this would be a pretty cool new barrier to surpass, to have that many players go in the draft. And I think that's something you can use at FAU in your recruiting, and certainly something Scott and Baylor continue to use.
Yeah, they had three draft picks the year Quincy and Perry got drafted. So that wouldn't be the first, but the first time they have two first rounders would be the first. And then 4 straight years we've had guys invited to the green room, and this is the first time they've ever had two invited to the green room in the same year. So great run. Got to work with Jacoby in the guards. He's a special person and player, and recruited Missy from Prolific Prep and PSA Cardinals, but it's originally from overseas in Cameroon, and such a wonderful family. Both families are absolutely out of this world. Did a great job raising good young men who are also good players. But yeah, it'll be a special night for Baylor. Anytime you get two green room invites, you're probably doing some things right.
I think you should show up, by the way. I don't know what your plans are, but I think that would.
I've been invited to show up, so
Ooh,
yeah,
nice.
we'll just leave it at that.
That'll be interesting because I could see you maybe having some Owls gear on in the.
I think I'll pull a
That's a.
normal sport coat that night, but yeah,
Oh,
we'll see.
okay. That would be a really good opportunity. When I read about Jacoby, they say his intangibles are like off the charts, and y'all do recruit really good people. But I find that interesting. It's like McCain out of Duke and Jacoby, for whatever reason, are the ones I keep reading about, that their intangibles. They're obviously great players. They wouldn't be slated to go, perhaps in the lottery. But outside of that, is that something that jumped right off the page at you about Jacoby in the early days of recruiting him? And I couldn't help but think of that in reading that, and then looking back on him showing up at the podium after what had to be one of the toughest moments of his life or his career. Again, I think that speaks to his character, because as a journalist, I got to tell you, I was sitting there doubting whoever made that call. I was like, why are we doing that to this kid? But I don't know. Again, I don't know how all that works. But I thought it spoke. Looking back now, after reading even more about his intangibles, it sort of makes sense that even at the lowest of lows, he would be up there representing the team in that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a picture of us and Jacoby my first year at Baylor. He was in junior high playing for the Houston Hoops. And so some of it's luck. Okay. Some of it's luck that he just turned out that way. And most of it's his parents. But we started recruiting probably my second year at Baylor. We started this NBA background check where we asked all these questions and did a lot more in-depth research on the kind of person we were bringing into the program. And I think Jacoby is just the peak of that. You know, we knew that his character mattered. I think the NBA teams are trusting Baylor guys more because they know kind of background checks we're doing. And at this point, we've developed better relationships with the league probably than we've ever had because of the last 4 years. And so there's a trust, but a lot of that trust is just picking kids with high character. And he's as high a character lottery pick as you're ever going to find.
Man, and I keep seeing, I saw one of those guys we all follow from ESPN even moved him up as a possibility, I think, at 7. And I don't know how much, I mean, you've been busy with all your new players and on that. And I didn't want to bring that up. I do want to talk about Coach Mazzulla here, but I'm fascinated with the bunch you had to kind of bring in on the fly. So you go portal, you had to go Euro, which, I mean, you're great at doing because you've been all over the globe. And I'm sure there's, a couple of holdovers as well. Like, how is this sort of just arranged? I mean, you get there and boy, you have to start working. You got to put a staff together and then you got to get some players. Now that you have them on campus, or probably most of them, I know some of these European players, sometimes you got to wait a little bit to get them
Yeah,
where
yeah,
you need them to be. But
that's true.
how's that coming together? And like, how pleased are you? Obviously, I don't know what it's going to be like your first year. This will be somewhat of a work in progress, but how pleased are you with the group that you've brought in, and like what stands out the most about this group?
Yeah, well, first you love your staff, and I think pretty pleased with the guys that we were able to keep and also hire in the roles. Uh, you know that they really care about me. They want to see me be successful, but more importantly, we're a team, and there are a lot of experts in their own area. And then part of the expertise is you got Isaiah working with Adam Silver. You got Obim with both the Pacers and the Thunder, and AD in the front office with the Suns. We're using a lot of analytics, and then our relationships around the world to pick out some things that are important to us. So we had some goals, like to get at least 5 guys who can shoot 40% from three, and we were able to do that. We wanted 5 guys who were switchable between the size of 6'5" and 6'11" with plus 7-foot wingspans. And we needed a couple centers and a couple point guards, but we had these boxes we wanted to tick. And then it just comes down to your relationships and being able to get the guys that fit those boxes. And you can't get lost because the emotion of it's hard. Recruiting 10 in one spring is incredibly hard. That's 3 years of work in 2.5 months. Like, that's not the way it's meant to be done. But you just can't let the emotion overwhelm you to where you take kids who don't fit your plan or your roster or construction or your boxes. And I think we were patient enough to find exactly what we were looking for. So you can't take it personal. There's going to be a lot of yes and no's. You just got to stay the course. And I'm pretty thrilled with how we stayed the course and what the roster looks like right now.
And the wild part is, we were just talking about Coach Tang, who's a good friend of both of ours, and Grant McCaslin, the same way. As the ebb and flow of the portal, you can sort of think, oh man, we're struggling. And then all of a sudden, late, you land somebody, or somebody doesn't go to the draft, right? Or they
Mhm.
opt out of the draft and they come back. So it's the same way. There may have even been moments last year where it's like, oh, what's Baylor doing? And then you get Ray J, you get Jay Nunn, who end up becoming huge parts of y'all's run last year. So it's an extremely interesting process. But I did have to smile when there's somebody from a European player. The one in particular, I was like, okay, there's John. He's using all his resources and all those miles around the. But that how many players on this team will have at least had European experience or were born overseas?
5 Euros, I believe, and one African kid from the NBA Academy, which is where Jonathan Chamuchacho and Flo Thamba and all them started. So 6 of the 13. And then we got a walk on from Canada who we think long term can turn into a scholarship guy, really great shooter. So 7 from around the globe outside of the United States.
A couple of American players on the team as
Yeah,
well.
or at least half the team still, and it's like super important. A lot of our age and maturity and
Yeah.
strength is we got 3 guys in the backcourt that all average between 15 and 20 at their prior school, and all 3 American kids. So uh, it's well rounded. You just got to do what you can to just find the guys who fit the pieces. So
All right, and I've got to learn where FAU where they play all their TV games, and I've really
well,
because in the
ESPN just
past
bought the league for the next 8 to 10 years, I think. So all our games will be on ESPN. We're gonna make it easy.
in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
So as long as I have my app, I can get yes. Okay, well that's good. That's good, and I'll have the gear on and all of that kind of thing. So yeah, that'll be exciting. Now I didn't want to leave this off. This your relationship, John, with Joe Mazzulla. It's come up before, and it was probably like right after he was hired. We were talking about that, and I found that so fascinating. But you were talking about athletes in action. As I recall, I assume that kind of goes back to that. When did you guys? When did you first meet Coach Mazzulla? And of course, all of Boston celebrating today as they close out the Mavs. And I do want to ask you at some point. I want to get a Luka take from you, but your relationship with Coach Mazzulla, and boy, y'all have become great friends over the years. Where did that start? And then I'll ask you about just kind of what it was like watching him in this during this unbelievable postseason run.
Yeah, I mean, that's an athletes in action story. I was coaching a group of Bulgarians from the national team. They came from Bulgaria to the United States for 6 weeks to train and get ready. So I was coaching that team, and we trained at a place in Cincinnati, Ohio. And Joe had just got done playing for West Virginia, and Hug's agent or people linked to him that represented some of his NBA players. Their hub, the agency, was out of Cincinnati. So Joe was training to play professionally overseas at the time at the same place that the AIA team was. And then the guy who owns the facility, Chris Arrington, I think introduced us. And then we just became light friends at that point. I didn't even think anything of it, to be honest. I just thought he'd go play overseas for 10 years. And then Hugs gave him the advice, you're famous now, you're not that great a player. You should get in coaching sooner than you think. And he actually took Hugs' advice. But the last thing he did was he played for us on a G League / European pro team that went to China to play against the Olympic team. We played 3 games against the Olympic team and traveled around for like a month. Our first game was in front of 50 million people, more people than watched the Super Bowl. Basketball is so beloved in China. And our friendship deepened then. And then I invited him to be my assistant coach, which is funny enough at this point. But my assistant coach on an AIA trip to Spain. And we spent a couple weeks there. He coached Rico and TP, Torian Prince, on that trip, which is a Baylor connection. And from there, we just became friends. I stood up in his wedding. He was a Division II coach. And the reality is our friendship predates all this. And Brad Stevens probably the one who's really lifted him up into this position, not me, but certainly one of my best friends. And more than that, a Christian brother. And I love him and I'm happy for him. But it was just started pretty innocently, honestly. We just introduced small world basketball, and you can shrink the world pretty fast. And we just happen to run into each other.
So, are you on a thread with him? And like, how do you handle that when you're really good friends with somebody, but they're in the midst of this huge run? Do you just because you're not like me? I mean, I'm a nosy journalist. You're going to really pick your spots, I would think.
Yeah,
But I
that's a
also
great way
know
to say
you
it.
like to be like encouraging. So you probably occasionally do you like wait till the end of a series and just congratulate him, or how do you kind of
I don't
handle
know
that
if there's
along the
like a
way?
Yeah, I don't know there's a perfect science. It's not my job to talk to him every day. That's Brad Stevens' job or his staff. And I'm not going to text him after a loss. That's just not, he doesn't need encouragement. He's a smart guy. And to me, that's sometimes the worst time to hear from somebody. You just want to go to the film and think. And I also, he's the head coach, not me. Uh, to be honest, I just check in and say I love him. I mean, maybe
Mm,
he called me 10 days ago before the finals to see how we handled the Final Four. But at the same time, he was getting advice from Pep LaGuardia from Man City, who's the best coach in the world probably right now in any sport. So he's got plenty of resources. Our relationship is based on our faith and our friendship. And I texted him that I loved him last night. And about 3:30 in the morning, he texted back and said, I love you so much. And we'll talk when it's time. Maybe I'll see him this summer. But uh, he's the head coach of one of the 10 most important sporting brands in the world right now. And it's my job to just take it, think about him as a friend. That's about it. But he's done a great job. And I love watching the way he's grown as a leader more than a coach. Basketball's not rocket science, but what he's done for that group of guys and the way they've shifted into this selfless basketball in a very selfish environment is pretty remarkable. So he's a better leader than coach, and he's obviously an unbelievable coach considering just won a world championship. So I just pick my spots, but he knows what he's doing. He doesn't need me.
are you a big international soccer guy? Like I'm fascinated with how obsessed he is with soccer. And it's not just, oh, I watch it. He applies some of those things to
Mhm.
basketball, even
Yeah.
when it comes to his timeouts. And we've all been there where like, why aren't they calling a timeout? Not just him, but any coach, right? And or like
Yeah.
Jason Kidd, the thing got away from him at the end of the first quarter. And you're like, I guess he's just trying to wait till the end of the quarter, but the game is like totally getting away from him. And I think Coach Mazzulla, much like soccer, just likes to let his players try to figure it out on the fly and not
Mhm.
always call timeouts when we think timeouts should be called. Is there any of that in you? Are you a big soccer guy?
Yeah. I mean, my time overseas every Monday, we would play soccer and I would play goalie and the guys would kick the ball at my head as hard as they wanted. And that was their chance to kick the ball at the head coach's head. And then they would gamble on it all the time. So even though I don't know it as well as them, I got to know it. And I didn't gamble, but I'd follow and I'd start liking different teams. And Pep specifically, that's the best passing team and the best at flow, I would say, as far as allowing the flow and passing to take over, coach in the world. And Joe's been wanting to institute that kind of mindset into his team for quite some time. So I think it's funny when people critique the idea of when to take timeouts. Phil Jackson didn't take timeouts and nobody said a word because he's a genius. But when you're 34 and you don't take timeouts, you're an idiot. So I think a lot of it comes down to context and perception. But he's taught those guys over the last 2 years how to play together and how to fix problems, how to make reads on the floor, how to know when people are switching and when not, what mismatch to pick on, who to attack. And he's done that by letting them be. And I think it's caused them to mature and grow up. So what started as a deep criticism for him, I think has let those guys really blossom into at times not even needing him, which I think is a sign of a good coach. Your team can do it by themselves. That's the point of being coaching, is to get out of the way and watch them be great. So uh, I think he probably should have called more timeouts than he has over the last 2 years, but I'm definitely leaning his way when it comes to teaching them how to play. And I think he's done absolutely remarkable job of that.
What'd you say to him? Was it 10 days? I mean, these finals now seem like they last forever, even though this thing only went 5 games. But when y'all's experience at winning the national title, you're in a bubble, so it was a little different kind of experience, obviously. But what did when he asked you about that? What were the couple things you said to him that were important for y'all's run?
Yeah, I don't think we talk much about basketball. We talk about prayer, which might be weird for some people, but part of our friendship. I think we talked about emotion. He's got the weight of Boston and the legacy of 18 titles on his shoulder, the emotion of going through that. My emotion was different. It was managing the fact that we were playing some of my best friends in Gonzaga. And then we're talking about loving the players and, prayer, emotion, and loving your guys. And then very little basketball. I'm gonna be honest with you. That's even though we can do that, that's very little to do with the conversation. So when you get to that end point, and Scott knows this better than me as the guy who was the head coach when we won it all, but you're managing so many other emotions, and at that point, you just call your friends or your family or your dad. So we just talked a little bit about that prayer and emotion, and then loving your guys.
All right. And is there any movie? Coach Mazzulla apparently watches The Town, which is an interesting film to watch a couple of times a week, apparently. And there's got to be something about that movie that really appeals to him. I don't know if he's totally explained that. Do you have a movie like that you go to more than any other, or not really?
No, I read a book, and I would say I probably pray and meditate, and I'm not a big media guy. I'm not on social media. I'm on Instagram but not Twitter, and I just don't get wrapped up in those things. I think for me, it's to get away and think, and just spend time talking to people that I trust. But no, I'd probably turn on a Cubs game in the background and kind of half watch it while I'm doing other things. You know what I mean? More than
Mm-hmm.
I would watch a movie, or in season, like if I get a Bears game on a Sunday. But um, yeah, for me, it's kind of sports in the background, and then I just think clearly, or I just turn it all off and think. But no, I'm not a movie buff, really. So
Yeah. All right. Please give Sarah my best and tell her I'm
thanks.
sorry. I've gone a little bit over my allotted time, which is
You're
not
fine.
shocking to you. The last thing I had for you, how do you think Luka? Like for me, it's like he made his first finals and had an incredible postseason run. Yet, as you know, the national media was stinging him after game three, has a really good game four, did not play particularly well, didn't shoot it well in game five. Kyrie had another rough game, which was his third in Boston of the series. But Luka in particular, is that just part of the deal when you're this great and this gifted, or do you think things have kind of gotten overboard? Like there's part of me, and maybe it's too much because I've covered the Mavericks and grew up loving the Mavericks, but like this really should be a time to celebrate the run he helped ignite. And yet it's absolutely not the way this thing is being talked about and analyzed. It's like what he did not accomplish. And I guess Jordan never lost a finals, but every other superstar maybe has been something through something similar. But what's your biggest takeaway when it comes to Luka after this finals?
I don't have a huge takeaway. I think patience is probably the best way to address that. I mean, how old is he? 24?
I think he may be on the verge of
23?
26.
Okay. So
Yeah.
he's plenty young. His prime's ahead of him. And the reality is most guys went through pain. I don't think LeBron won his first at 28. You could see the relief of Tatum last night, like having gone through 2 or 3 years of people saying he couldn't do it. You remember they called magic tragic magic. People don't remember that, but usually predating extreme success in the NBA is going through some kind of extreme trial or criticism publicly. And I wish that wasn't true. But it just happens to be that way because there can only be one each year that wins the whole thing. And I think he's way ahead of schedule, and he'll be just fine, and they'll figure it out at some point. And I think in sports, pain usually causes, you know, the great success is usually on the other side of pain, would be my answer. And if he processes what he went through this spring and summer well, then he'll be great. If he doesn't internalize it and get better from it, then that's a personal choice. But you're going to have to go through hard things before you become great in the NBA. So I think he's right on schedule, to be honest. And they just happen to surprise everybody. And I don't think he should be critiqued extra because they got through the Nuggets and the Timberwolves this year. I think he should actually be complimented. So I'm more on your side. And I think a little patience for him is going to work out just fine.
John, this was great. I appreciate it. I mean, the really official first guest of the Obstructed View podcast with Matt Mosley, Rogue Media Network. So I'm gonna let you have a couple of months away from me. Not. I mean, I'll still reach out to you, but publicly at least. But I'm glad you have everybody there on campus. A lot of excitement. I can't imagine And that's got to be fun to be in charge of it all. I mean, it's a lot on your plate, but NIL, all of that. I don't know if you heard Baylor has a new NIL czar, an old buddy of ours. So I don't know who the FAU NIL czar is, but given some of the talent y'all brought in, certainly y'all are active in that space. But thank you for doing this. Have a tremendous afternoon, and let's talk soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on. You're a good friend, and good luck with this.
You bet. There he goes, John Jakus, the FAU head basketball coach, on our podcast. Thank you, John. Well, fun to have Coach Jakus on, John Jakus. He's become a great friend, and it'll be great to see what he does at FAU. He referenced my sunglasses. Now, especially with the sun coming into this room, I may need to do something about that for our lighting. But really fun to have John on for. We had a kind of a soft opening the other night, but he's our first official guest on the Matt Mosley Obstructed View podcast. And in fact, my man Mike from Rogue has done a really nice job of putting a graphic together for that, kind of a fun one. So this one we'll get it out there everywhere you could possibly want to see it, and we'll continue on with these. But I did want to say a word on the finals coming to an end. It was, time has a way of healing wounds and life and sports and all of these things. And I think in time, we'll have a better sense of perspectives. An incredible run by the Mavs. I think it's really hard. I think you have to be an extremely cynical and kind of an angry person almost to sort of look at it and go, oh, that was a failure. Oh, they didn't win, so none of it mattered. Well, that's not how this works. And, part of LeBron's greatness is having gotten there time and time again. And, the Mavs are now knocking on the door. They got to a conference finals. Then this time they knocked down the door with Luka and got to the finals. And that's a huge part of it. And people like Barkley and others, they may get to one finals. I mean, it took Karl Malone, had all sorts of opportunities. And of course, he just had the misfortune of playing while Jordan was still great. And so he had to go somewhere else to finally get a title. In fact, I think people mostly forget Karl Malone, I think, was one of those Lakers when Kobe and Shaq were together and Karl was coming off the bench or something like that. Anyway, that's just, Luka. Now, here's the unfortunate part. Game 5, great opportunity to try to get it to 3-2. You don't put your best foot forward. Luka, let's just tell it like it is. His final line may have looked okay. Played a horrible first half, couldn't score, fell back into the settling for tough shots. Can he make them? Sure. What was the greatness of Game 4? It was backing people down low, using his body, using his incredible dribble, the decel, all the things that he does. And so they shot themselves into a major problem. Now, with 2 minutes left in the first quarter, they're fine. It's like 21-18, but like what happened way too often in the series, they just they couldn't finish the quarter. And so they end up down 28-18. The thing gets way away from them in the second quarter. And then there's Pritchard again, pulling up from midcourt, hitting one of those shots. And while I really don't care for ESPN's halftime presentation, it's not, it's especially compared to TNT. We all know it's a struggle. But, Myers said something kind of interesting to me. Like, and it was not even that big of a deal, but like at the end of, I think it was the first quarter, Dante Exum, Mavs have 3 seconds to go, and they just dribbled the timeout and accepted this horrible ending to the quarter. Whereas, there they are. Boston just firing away. Let's race this ball up the court. Let's take a half court shot. And Luka even tried to contest that a little bit. And the guy hits it. So, not a great moment for the Mavs. Not putting this on Exum. My gosh, he did the best he could when he got in there. But if your superstars don't show up, you've got no shot. And in this series, Tatum and Brown and Jaylen Brown obviously got the he got the MVP. I mean, the superstars showed up, and the Mavs did not. Over the course of the series, I think Luka's numbers were fine, but to say he had a great series would be a bit of a stretch, and you can't say that at all about Kyrie. Kyrie had 2 good games. I mean, in the series, maybe out of 5, not going to do it. Not going to do it. I mean, his best was game 4, but you're going to have like one really good game from your superstar in the finals. And quite honestly, fair or not, this has to be part of Kyrie's legacy. He's got great parts of his legacy, but the fact that when he goes back to TD Garden, he doesn't perform particularly well, has to be a big part of his legacy. Now he has time to redefine, to continue to add to that. He'll be back with the Mavs. They'll have Luka back. Lively really took a step in these finals, but they have to go do some things. Love PJ Washington. Love what Gafford did. I mean, they certainly have some parts. But, in a finals like this, you can't be leaning too heavily on like a Derek Jones Jr. And you really need somebody coming off the bench that can score for you. They don't have that. Green can't do that consistently. Exum can't do that consistently. The one guy who maybe could get his own shot is Hardy, and obviously they don't really trust him at this point. Hardaway Jr. is like totally hit and miss, and mostly miss, other than one game where it was already a lopsided deal. He cannot be relied upon. So, huge offseason. Will LeBron be talked about? Sure. Do I think that's a reasonable? I mean, like, would I love to have him? Sure, yeah. But that seems like a far-fetched deal. And the only reason you could do that is if you thought they could find a way to get Bronny James. And the truth is, anybody wanting LeBron is going to take him earlier than number 59, which is or 50, is that right? 57, whatever pick they have late in the second round. So that is where we are. So wanted to comment on that. We'll have much more on the NBA. Have loved having Chuck Cooperstein, Brian Damaris, others on my radio show. I promise you we'll have a lot of those guys on our podcast, and we'll be promoting the podcast over on the radio show. So there'll be symmetry, cross promotion. Won't that be exciting? We'll all be very excited about that. But thanks to Mike, thanks to Corey, the whole gang, Zach, and everybody for being a part of this one. We'll continue this throughout the summer, but I just thought having John Jakus on was a lot of fun. He's obviously a great dude. He's a great friend. And I thought that was fascinating that Coach Joe Mazzulla from the Celtics reached out to Coach Jakus to try to sort of, get a feel for how to approach the finals. Pretty cool. I thought that was maybe the most interesting sort of newsworthy part of that podcast. All right. For Rogue Media Network, I am Matt Mosley, and that was the Obstructed View podcast. We'll see you next time.
We are Rogue Media Sports.